So welcome everyone. I want to talk about presentation skills here, and I've specifically called this magnetic messages because I want to talk about how to deliver more magnetic messages, and specifically in a work context or a business context, because I know there are a lot of people who are required to give presentations at work, and you might feel comfortable standing up in front of the room, but you know that there are some simple things that you can do, or there's some things that you can do to make your messages your presentations more compelling. And I want to talk about some of those things, and I really want to focus on some simple things that you can do that will dramatically lift the quality of your presentations. Now, my goal is not to turn you into a professional speaker. I know there are a couple of my professional speaker colleagues on this webcast today, and if you look at some of the things that I'm sharing, you might roll your eyes and go, oh, that's really basic. But my goal is really to, as a professional speaker, some of these things I'm teaching you are too basic. But that's because for us, this is our day job, and we obsess over our presentations. And I know for most people in a work context, you can't. You've already got your own day job, and you've got to deliver presentations on top of that. So that's the goal of today's webcast, to give you some really simple, practical things that you can do to dramatically improve and enhance the quality of your presentations. Now, this is a handout that goes along with today's webcast. You don't need it for the webcast itself, but any time in the next 45 minutes, if you want to download the handout, it's on the right-hand side of your control panel. Just download it. And it's really a 20-question survey, a self-assessment survey, to give you an idea of what are your strengths and what are areas that you can improve on in terms of your own business presentations. So please download that and work through that at your own pace in your own time. We won't go through that today, but I want to give that to you as a takeaway so that you can do an assessment yourself. And of course, feel free to share it with other people as well. There's also, at the end of today's webcast, there'll be an exit survey. And if you complete the exit survey at the end of the webcast, as a thank you, I will send you chapter 2 of my book, The Future of Leadership, which is all about presentation skills. So that'll give you a different angle on how to deliver and particularly prepare and deliver presentations in a number of different contexts. So today, I'm really talking about you presenting in front of a room. But in that chapter, I talk about what do you do if you've got a one-on-one meeting, what do you do if you've got a small group, what do you do if you've got a big group. So that'll be really useful for you if you haven't already got that. I know a number of people have already got my book, but if you haven't, then I think you'll find that chapter particularly interesting. Now, I'm also running a one-day masterclass on these ideas, on how to create and deliver more magnetic messages. It's in Perth. It's on the 2nd of May, so it's in about a month's time. And I'll go through it as one day, so we go through these things in a lot more detail. Now, in a 45-minute webcast, obviously, I'm not going to cover all the material that I'm going to cover in that masterclass. In fact, there are 7 segments in that masterclass. I don't even want to cover all 7 of them today, because then I'll just be rushing through them and you won't get any value out of it. So what I'm going to do today is pick 2 or 3 things, depending on how we go with questions and so on. It'll be either 2 or 3 things from there, and I'll cover a couple of them in a little bit more detail, so you have some practical value that you can take away from today, rather than trying to superficially skim over all 7 of them. I've run sessions like this before, and I always ask for feedback afterwards, and people fill in these cards when I run these sessions in person. So a few weeks ago, I ran this session for a group here in Perth, and got this sort of feedback, gave me the confidence to do more presentations and better presentations. Sonia said, fast, effective techniques. Can't wait to put them into practice. And my favorite from Leanne said, before today, sad face, after today's smiley face, in terms of presentations. Now, there was a slightly longer session than in this webcast, but I'm hoping that I can give you enough value and enough practical ideas that you might be able to give in your own mind this kind of feedback in terms of the value you got from today. Okay, so let's get into today and the idea of magnetic messages. So my rules of engagement in all my webcasts are, first of all, I would like you to think. So this is a chance for you to think a little bit differently from what you would normally do. And you've got the chance to spend the next 40 minutes in this webcast focused on some of the ideas, and also be a bit playful with them. So I'm going to give you the chance to engage. We're going to have some polls. We're going to have some quiz questions, and I'm going to do some demos. So in your mind or in practice, be a bit playful as you engage during today's webcast, but also I want to make sure that you've got things that you can take away and put into action straight away. For people who don't know me, because it's quite a reasonable sized group here, I speak. So my day job is speaking at conferences, and I speak to a number of organizations around Australia and New Zealand, and I obsess about presentation skills and delivering better presentations because I have to. This is what I get paid by clients to do. And so I have a lot of time that I put into my presentations. Excuse me. So my typical presentation context is at speaking on a big stage, spotlights, a large audience in a conference venue, speaking to could be 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, and they're there for that event, not just to hear me speak, but I'm quite often the opening keynote speaker at the conference, and then they've got another 2 or 3 days of conferences. So in some ways, I think I'm quite lucky. So a lot of people would say they would hate to be in that sort of environment. They don't want to do public speaking or presentation skills, and they'd especially hate such a big audience. I think in a lot of ways, I'm lucky because I get to present in a context where most people are looking forward to my presentation. They're there at the start of the conference, they're excited, they're energized, they're hoping that the conference is going to get off to a great start. So they're really in a positive frame of mind before I start presenting. It's not always the case in many business or work contexts in presentations. So you may be presenting to a small group who's coming into a meeting and they have been interrupted from their regular work. They come into a meeting, they know that most meetings are boring, they know that most presentations they've seen are boring, so they've got very low expectations. And if you're the presenter, then you've got to overcome that. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go, because we'll talk about the concept of framing when we get to it. I also run small group workshops as well, and they are in a much smaller context, but again, me at the front of the room. It might be with PowerPoint and flip chart, and it's much more interactive. So you might be running sessions like this, but again, in a work context, it might not even be a workshop. It may be just you presenting information. So as I said, I'm obsessed about presentation skills, and I work really hard at my presentations. I do a lot of online presentations like this one here that you're attending at the moment. In fact, Citrix, the company who created GoToWebinar and now is part of LogMeIn, they have engaged me to run presentations about how to build better online presentations. So they book me to speak to some of their clients and to some of their customers about how to deliver better online presentations, because they know I do a good job at that. And I can say this because I know I've seen a lot of presentations, and I'm sure that you have as well, online presentations, which are pretty boring, and they could have just been a recording that you watched. And I want to make sure that my online presentations aren't like that. So I'm going to make this quite interactive, and I've done that with all my presentations as well. I've also written quite a bit about presentation skills. So I wrote a book a few years ago called Webinar Smart. So I've been running webinars for now. I looked at it, it's been 10 years now since I've been running webinars, and I wrote a book about how to prepare and deliver great webinars. And it's about the structure. The same, I wrote a workbook, they call it a learning module, for the International Institute of Directors and Managers, which takes you through how to build and craft and design a presentation before delivering it. And also, this book is not a book that I wrote, but it's a book by Guy Reynolds. And if you're interested in better presentations, particularly the visual side of presentations, then Presentation Zen is the best book on the planet around that. And I'm showing it for you for two reasons. One is because I recommend the book, but also because Guy invited me to write a section in the book about the visuals for online presentations. So I'm there with Seth Godin, and Nancy Duarte, and Guy Kawasaki, and some of the really well-known presenters and experts in presentation skills. So I've got a section in that book as well. So I'm sharing that not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I'm obsessed about this stuff. So it is my day job, and it's not yours. And I know that if you're presenting at work, presenting in a business context, what you're looking for are skills that will help you deliver presentations, particularly prepare presentations quicker, easier, so they can't be particularly technically difficult, and also safer. And by safer, I mean appropriate for a business setting. So in my keynote presentations, I'll do a magic trick. I'll play I'll play the piano app on my little iPad mini. I'll have a lot of humor and jokes and things. I'll show some entertaining videos. For most of those things are not appropriate in a work business context. So you need things that are appropriate. So, and that's what I mean by safe, that they're pretty simple. So you're not going too far out on a limb. You're not going to do something that's very risky, but you still want to do something that's engaging. So that's what I want to show you today. Okay, so to start with, let's do our first bit of interaction, because I said I want to make this interactive and engaging. And let's look at how much time you spend in meetings. And what I'm looking for here is the cost of your meetings. And I've said the cost of bad meetings, but let's figure out, and I've got a very simple formula for you to figure out for yourself how much of your salary or how much of your income annually is being spent in meetings. Okay, so here's a formula that you use. So this is the formula to figure out the cost of your time. So if you take your salary in thousands of dollars, multiplied by the average number of hours you spend a week in meetings, and then basically multiply by 20. So add a zero and then double it. So if you want, this is an easy way to do it in your head. Of course, if you want to use a calculator, you can do that as well. So let me give you an example. So if you're the Australian median salary is $65,000. So you say 65, let's make it 70 to make it easy. Multiplied by, let's say someone spends 10 hours a week in meetings, and I know that there are people who spend a lot more than that, but let's say you do. So it's 70,000, so 70 times 10, 700, times another 10 is 7,000, times 2 is 14,000. I think that's right. So that's $14,000 of your salary goes into meetings. Now, I know there are people who earn a lot more than that and also spend a lot more time in meetings. So can you do that calculation for yourself? Now, don't share the answers, so don't share it in the question box or anything like that. But I'm going to do a quick poll here. So let me just leave that up there for another 5 seconds so you can do the calculation. It's a pretty simple calculation. Take your salary, multiply it by the average number of hours you spend each week in meetings, and then basically multiply by 20. Okay, and then let's out of interest, let's do a quick poll here. So let me launch the first poll. How much are your meetings costing you? So I'm not asking you exact numbers, but I'm giving you some ranges. So if you can please just complete the poll. This is completely anonymous, so I'm not going to show what each person has scored, but let's see what the numbers come up to as a group. Good, so about half the people have voted. So I'll leave the poll open until about 80% of people have voted. So that's coming up now to about 50. Good, so we've got most people, so I'm going to leave another 3 seconds. Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. Let me share the results. Okay, so you can see the results here. So less than 25,000, we don't know what that is. That could be a lot less than 25,000, but let's take the next range there. So 2/3 of the people here say that between $25,000 and $50,000 a year is being spent of your own time, your own income is being spent in meetings. Now, that's not all bad meetings, but if there are bad meetings, if there's time wasting, if there's bad presentations, if you walk out of a meeting thinking that's an hour of my time I'm never going to get back again, just remember that it might be adding up to about $50,000 worth of your time as well. And depending on how senior you are and how many hours you spend in meetings, that number is going to be quite a lot higher for some people. And when you add it up for all the people in the meeting, your meetings could be very costly. So part of the reason we want to improve our presentation skills, not just for yourself, but for the other people in the room, is because it makes your meetings much more efficient and, more importantly, much more effective. Because the challenge that we have at the moment is not that we can't find the information that we need. It's just that there's too much information. And so we need people who can present that information in an effective way so that you can cut through the clutter and get your message across. This is the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. And about 5 years ago, he said this: every 2 days we create as much information as we did in that 2 days as we did right from the start of civilization up until he said year 2003. And that's only got faster and faster now as we're creating more and more information. So the challenge is not to find information. The information is there, but to be able to filter it and deliver it in a relevant and engaging way. And the World Economic Forum, as part of their Future of Jobs report, when they identified the skills for the future, one of the skills, which I think is particularly relevant today, is the skill here of leadership and social influence. So leadership now is not about your business, what title you've got in your business card, or whether you've got the corner office, or how long you've been in a role. It's about, can you be an influencer? And a big part of that is how well you can present. And you know this, if you're a leader, that the value of a good presentation is dramatically higher the better the presentation is. So just doing a few simple things to improve your presentation skills can really magnify your influence unfairly. So, and I want to give you a couple of unfair things that you can do, because now it's like to be a leader, it's not only good enough to be an expert, but you've got to be an authority as well. An authority is somebody who learns some information, is an expert in it, but can also deliver and share that information and is known as an expert. So authority is an expert who's known. And as I said earlier, it's not just for you, but it's for your team members as well. So if you're a leader and you've got team members, there may be 1 or 2 team members you can earmark as if they could just improve their presentation skills. They're pretty good everywhere else, but that'll make a big difference. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons why this idea of magnetic messages is super important. And so here's an overview of the things that we cover. By the way, the things that we cover in that handout. So if you haven't downloaded the handout yet, now's a good time to do it if you want to. And these are the 7 things that I cover in that one-day masterclass. I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But today I want to give you some practical stuff. I don't want to make this a sales pitch for the masterclass. But these are 7 things we're going to cover in the masterclass. So we talk about getting ready, having a clear point, designing a good flow for your presentation, and then this is the visual design. So these things like stories, data, visuals and models, how to engage your audience, how to be able to present at scale, and then a little bit about presence. For most people here, and in a business context, this is not about where you gesture and how you use your voice and how you stand on stage and whether you stand to the left or the right of the stage and walk across. Those sort of things, they're important if you're a professional speaker, but most of them aren't as important when you're talking about a business presentation. So as I said, we're not going to cover all 7 of them, not by any means. We're going to look at a few of them. So let's look at, we're really going to look at flow, design, and maybe a little bit around scale. If we get to it, it just depends on how we go with that time and what sort of questions that I get here. I'm more than happy to take as many questions as come through, and that'll determine how much we get through here. Okay, so let's start with this first one. We're going to jump ahead to flow because there's one really important thing in flow that I think will make a big difference to your presentations. So broadly speaking, there are 3 things around flow. So every presentation has these 3 parts to it. And so you can see them here. Explain the why, follow a clear path, end with clear actions. Think of this as framing, message, and action. So every presentation has framing, which is getting people in the right frame of mind before you deliver your presentation. Then the message itself, so what's the message in your presentation? And then the actions, which is what people are going to do when they walk out of the room. So let's look at this one here. So we're not going to do all 3 of them. I'm going to look at this one here. This explain the why, which is all about framing. Now, I touched on this earlier when I talked about myself as a presenter. So this is just about a year ago. So I did a lot of presentations around Australia. I picked this one because this was almost exactly a year ago. I was presenting in Melbourne, Federation Square, beautiful venue. This was for a travel group. They mostly based in Australia, but they were international. So they had all the Australian team here. They'd flown people in from around the world. Part of the Indian team was here, part of New Zealand and elsewhere around the world. On the side of the stage here, they had a video camera. They were live streaming my presentation and the rest of the conference to the other people around the world as well. There are other team members, and there's a real buzz. So I was doing the opening keynote presentation. This is the only time that everyone in the team gets together in a year. So everyone from around the world. So there's a real buzz. There's a really strong culture in this group. And so people were in a very, very positive frame of mind before they heard me speak. Later in the year, presenting at the beautiful Melbourne Convention Centre, this was the ARI conference, the Australian Human Resources Institute conference. I was doing the opening keynote presentation on an evening. So they had the main conference program was the next 2 days, but in the evening they had the CEO. She spoke. She introduced me. I did my opening keynote presentation, and after that there was welcome drinks and wandering around the trade booth. So again, people were in a very positive frame of mind. They were there ready for a great conference. They were hoping that I was going to give a good opening keynote presentation, and they were looking forward to that, and then they were looking forward to having a nice evening of socializing and then 2 days of conference. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is because with many of my presentations, my keynote presentations, people are in a very positive frame of mind before I start speaking, or even before I get introduced. That's not true for most business or work contexts. In most business or work contexts, you've got this wonderful message that you want to deliver to your audience, but they're not in a very positive frame of mind to receive it. Some of them might be, some of them are partly there, but you don't know. So answer these 4 questions for them. So these are the 4 framing questions that everybody is asking before they're willing to calm their mind and listen to your message. So the 4 questions are: why me, why this, why you, and why now? So why me is, why is this the right fit for me? Why am I in the right room to hear this message now? Okay, so this is basically saying, is this relevant to me? The why this is, what am I going to get from this? What are the outcomes that are valuable for me? It's a little bit different from why me. So why me is saying, is this the right fit for me? And then what are the outcomes I'm going to get if I know I'm in the right room? And then who are you to be standing at the front of the room and delivering this message? So what's your authority? And then finally, what's the urgency for me to take action now? So it might be a great message, I'm in the right room, great message, being delivered by somebody who I trust, but when I walk out of the room, then life's going to get in the way, work's going to get in the way, and I'm not going to take action. So I need to, so as a presenter, you need to deliver that, demonstrate that urgency as well. Okay, so people are always asking these 4 questions in their mind before you start your message. So make sure that you answer all of them. So some of them will already be answered for them, but you can't rely on it. So just make sure that you, as a checklist, early in your presentation, you answer all 4 of these. What do I mean by that? Let me give you a practical example. Let's take today's webcast. So I went a little bit overboard today, and I will admit it, in doing the framing at the start of this webcast. And I did it specifically because I wanted to give you some examples of this particular element. So now we are about halfway into the webcast, and I've done a lot of the framing stuff, and it's taken up about 10 to 15 minutes early on in the webcast. Most of my webcasts, I don't do it that way. We're into some of the skills, more of the skills by now, but I did it this way specifically to demonstrate some of these things. So in a 45-minute presentation, you wouldn't do as much framing or as many framing bits as I did, but I did it to demonstrate. For example, let me show you a couple of things I did in each of these areas. I reckon I did 11 things in total. Let me show you 8 of them. So is this the right fit? So I wanted to demonstrate to you. So I had this slide that said, I'm a professional speaker, and I know you're not, so I wanted to make sure that you weren't expecting that I'm going to give you difficult stuff to learn that only professional speakers have the time to do. We did this, I showed you some of the things that other people who've attended sessions like this have said. So I hope that that gave you some reassurance that, yep, this could be useful to you as well. When we talked about benefits, we did this exercise, which took some time, and you wouldn't normally do necessarily something as long as this just to demonstrate benefits, but you might. And we talked about the idea of by doing this, by improving your presentation skills, you move from expert to authority. My own authority, I talked about presented for Citrix, I've written books, I've featured in Guy Reynolds' book with some other world-class presentation skills experts. So that's part of building my authority. I talked about the fact that I speak for and have worked with a number of clients, really high-profile clients that you've probably heard of. So that's my authority. And then why should you take action now? Because we've got so much clutter in our world and so much information in our world. And even the World Economic Forum says that this is a really useful thing for us to do. Okay, so that's an example of how I've used framing, and I use all of these 4 things, and very intentionally in my presentation before we got to this stage. Okay, I'm just going to stop now and just check in if you've got any questions about framing in specifically, or anything else that we've covered so far. And all you've got to do to ask a question is type your question in the question box, and I'll read it out. Okay, so Jeff says you'll have to use all 4 all the time. So broadly speaking, the answer is yes. You do want to answer all 4 questions. Why me, why this, why you, and why now, early in your presentation in some way. Now, it might be that some of them you think I don't need to answer it. For example, the authority, why you, if you're standing up and you're the team leader and you're speaking about a project you're working on, and this is an audience that's really familiar with you, you may not need to answer the why you question. You may not need to answer the why me question, because people know why they're in the room and they know why this is the right fit. So sometimes you can vary how deep you have to go into each of these. For me, for example, a lot of the why you is being answered by my introduction, which the MC reads out beforehand. So I don't need to spend a lot of time myself building my credibility, because the MC's done that or the conference program's done that. But don't rely on it. And again, I feel a bit lucky there. Not everyone does that. Justice says, how do you think about the questions and the graphics you use? What's your process? Yeah, so I always look at what am I trying to achieve here? So what's my outcome? So I think I'm answering your question here correctly, Justice. So for example, like this slide here, where I want to talk about the clients I've worked with, it makes sense for me to show client logos, because that's instantly recognizable. If I've got a quotation and I can use somebody's photo, if I can find a version of a photo that I can use with permission, then I'll use that with the quotation. For this one here, at the World Economic Forum, it makes sense for me to put the cover of the report on there rather than just put on the slide World Economic Forum. Now, sometimes I will put just the reference, but when I can show it visually, I will. So my rule is slides are visual aids, and I want to make sure that they are visual aids and they're not just text. So you'll see that most of my slides don't have much text on them. And when we talk about bullet points, you'll see that even more so. Well, we'll talk about that soon. Yeah, so I hope that helps you a little bit, Justice. I'm happy to answer a follow-up question around that if you want to. But I start with, in fact, I would start with a blank slide with just a few words on there, and then I'll decide how to make it visual or whether to make it visual. Okay, let me see if any other questions have come in. Don't see anything else yet. Thanks from Justice, so you're welcome. Okay, let's continue. So, next poll. The next poll is actually a quiz. So I'm going to use the polling software here to actually run a quiz rather than doing a poll. So in fact, when I run these sessions, when I do workshops or run these sessions in person, these sort of questions, I run a quiz as a bit of a game show. So get people at their tables to sit there and they can do this online quiz and the scores go up online and we run like a little 10-question quiz. I'm not going to do that in the webcast today. It doesn't really lend itself to that. But what I'm going to do is I've taken some of those questions and uploaded them as poll questions. So here's the first one. We've got a couple more to go through the webcast. So which of these do you think was rated the most annoying thing about presentation slides? So this is Dave Parody, a Canadian guy who talks a lot about PowerPoint and presentation skills. And he does this annual survey or biannual survey, and this is the most recent one. So which of these 4 things was rated the most annoying about presentation slides? I can tell you that all 4 did come in the list. I'm just curious to know whether you think, it's a little bit of a guess, which one was the most annoying. Okay, so yeah, okay, so actually this is surprisingly good. in terms of results. And as I said, it's a little bit of a guess, but most people have voted now. Let me leave it for another 3 seconds. Okay, good. Let's see. So the survey said, whoops, let me share the poll results. It's not coming up. Share poll results. Okay, so most of you think that the big thing was presenter read the slides, and survey said exactly that. Okay, so all of them were rated as annoying, but the one that was most annoying by far was that the presenter just had the slides. In fact, they should have been slide notes, not slides. But then the others, like the full sentences, so instead of having summary or bullet points, they had full sentences, or the text was too small. And as you can imagine, that's related to presenter read the slides because the text was too small. So because they had to cram a whole bunch of words onto the slides. Okay, so I did this particular poll or this particular question at this point because I want to talk about this design area here. Because my goal here is and again, in the masterclass, we go into this area in a lot of detail. So there are 3 areas here. So one is being able to present data, so graphs and stats and numbers, which we're not going to talk about. Another one's about telling stories. We're not going to talk about that today. But avoid boring slides, we are going to talk about. And by boring, what I mean is I want you to never, never, never have bullet lists on your slides ever again. And I would love it if everyone walks out of this webcast saying, wow, I never need to show a bullet list anywhere on my slides ever again. And I want to show you in the next 5 or 6 minutes how to make that a reality and how to do it really quickly. How to do it really quickly without having to spend hours in your slide design. Okay, so no naming and shaming here, but let me show you a couple of examples of bad slides that I've seen. And as an opening keynote speaker, there's quite often somebody before me. It might be the CEO or somebody else or a sponsor who's speaking. And I'm usually sitting somewhere near the front row at the front table, and I will occasionally take a photo of some slides. So this is a bit blurry, but that's probably not a bad thing anyway, because I'm not trying to identify the people who present this slide. But here's somebody who presented this slide. It wasn't even her own material. It was 10 things from Brene Brown. And she had this slide and she just spoke to each of those 10 points. And really, it was more of a prompt to her than a visual aid for us in the audience. Here's another one where I've grayed out the guilty party's name. So again, it's more like something that you put in a handout or as speaker notes rather than a visual on a slide. This is one, again, my partner Nikki and I went on a cruise recently, and they had a guest presenter there, and she was speaking about something which I thought was really interesting around neuroscience, but her slides were terrible. And this is one example of the slide that she had. And, she was talking about characteristics of neural networks, physical and functional characteristics, just was a very boring slide. Now, imagine if that slide had been presented in a more visual way, like this, for example. So she starts with a slide like that, and then she says, we're going to talk about physical characteristics, blah, 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 and then the functional characteristics, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now I haven't gone into the details, but you can see how much more effective that slide is as a visual. Now, to go from the bad version to this version probably takes about 3 minutes of work, and 2 minutes of that is finding a nice picture to go into the background. Okay, so if you know about this and you know how to do it, it won't come as a surprise to you. But if this is news to you, you'll be amazed at how easy it is to do. So I'm going to demonstrate this. Let me do two demonstrations just so you can see 2 examples of it in practice. So let me pick this one here, Stephen Habit's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which many of us will be familiar with. So this is a boring version of that slide. And fortunately, it's a version that many presenters will show. All they do is here are the 7 habits, and the best that they will do is that they've grouped them into 3 areas: independent, interdependent, and the last one, sharpen the saw. Here's a better version of that slide. So Stephen Habit's 7 habits, the 3 which are around being independent, which are blah, blah, and blah. 3 about being interdependent, which are blah, blah, and blah. And then habit number 7. So you can see that this is not a particularly beautiful slide, but it's so much better than the bullet list that you saw on the previous slide. So how do you get from the boring bullet list to the attractive visual? Well, you can do that very easily, and I'm going to do that right now for you, using a feature in PowerPoint called Smart Art. So if you know about Smart Art, then this will be familiar to you, but a lot of people don't know about it. So let me drop out of the PowerPoint slideshow, and here I am back in my raw PowerPoint. So this is a feature that's available in PowerPoint on both PC and Mac. It's not available in Keynote on the Mac, so if you use Keynote, then you're out of luck. Yeah, you have to use PowerPoint for this, or create the slide in PowerPoint and then import it into Keynote. Okay, so here's how you do it. So first of all, you do design it as a bullet list. So you design it like this, exactly the way that you display it, but then you'd never display it this way. What you do is there's an option in here called Convert to Smart Art Graphic, and it gives you a number of different versions that you could use. And so I'm going to go down here to this one here, and there it is. Okay, so now I've got that designed as a Smart Art graphic. And because I started, let me go undo that, because this was a 2-level list, so it was 3 top-level items, and the first 2 had 3 underneath them each, then PowerPoint is smart enough to know that it should turn into a list like that, into a graphic like that. I want the buttons a little bit more 3D effect. Let me change the colors, and it'll give me some color options which will match the template that I'm using, and I might even want to show the items one at a time, so I'll make them appear one by one. Okay, that's it. Probably took me 30 seconds to do that, even with the explanation. So now if I play that, I get what I showed you before. So I'm just clicking as I do this. Okay, there it is. Okay, so there's a Smart Art graphic. And that was just done using a very basic feature of PowerPoint, built into PowerPoint, and takes about 30 seconds to do. Let me do one more example, and then I'll stop and just take some questions around that. Okay, so here's the example of the slide about neural networks. So again, how do you create that as a Smart Art graphic? So let's do that. So you start off with it as a standard bullet list. So I've designed this as a bullet list. Let me drop out of PowerPoint again. Okay, you can see it here. So where do we go? Convert to Smart Art. And now it's not just these that appear. There's a whole bunch of other Smart Art graphics as well. So and you can play around with these yourselves to see what you can, what sort of options you got available to you. The one I used for this one was this, what they call a grouped list, I think. Yeah, like that. Okay, so that's this nice Smart Art graphic. I made it a bit. So then I found a picture to put in the background, and because the picture was more visual on this side, I moved this picture, this graphic across. Let me change the design of that, change the color scheme. Oh, let's go to this color scheme here. And then again, I had the animation appearing, in this case, one by one. Okay, and that created a Smart Art graphic. I won't bother about going and finding a picture, just for the sake of time, but this is now what we've got. So this is what the graphic looks like. Okay, so that's Smart Art. It's a really valuable tool. It's a very simple thing to use, and as you can see, it dramatically improves the quality of your presentations. Let me just stop and see if there's any questions around that. Okay, I think this question, Lauren, is from earlier. How do you collect the handwritten testimonials that you showed? So Lauren, what I did there was I actually give out, so we give out handwritten cards, and people write on the cards at the end of each of our sessions, and then we collect them and then just take a photo of them and insert them as graphics into the slide. Belinda says, I can't believe how easy that was. Yeah, absolutely. So it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. And again, this is one of those things where you'll see graphics like this, and you may not have figured out how it was done, but now you know how it's done. What sources do you use for the graphics, Justice? So this is one of the things that we cover in a bit more detail in the masterclass, but there are a number of sources for graphics where you can find good quality graphics. The one that's probably the best known is Shutterstock.com. That's a paid service, so you do have to pay for the use of them. But once you pay for the use once, it's royalty free, so you can use it over and over again. There's some free sources as well. Pixabay is one of them, and you can use that. The Hurried and Harried, excellent shortcut for the Hurried and Harried. Yes, thank you, Ross. Cool. Okay, so as you can see, Smart Art is it's a really effective tool. So I hope you use that. I hope that even that alone might be really useful for you in terms of developing, particularly preparation of your slide decks. So there's nothing wrong with PowerPoint to start with. With bullet points when you start, but don't ever show the bullet point to your audience, bullet list to your audience. Make sure that your bullet lists are purely for getting started with your Smart Art. Okay, let me just show you one other example of a really useful tool in PowerPoint. And by the way, like I'm not saying that everything that you do is about PowerPoint tools, but again, as I said, I want to give you things that are really easy to use and quick to use. And one of them is being able to move off script easily. So one of the challenges with people using PowerPoint is you think, if I start using PowerPoint, then I'm stuck to my script. So if I have to make my presentation shorter, or someone asks me a question and I have to be taken off track, I can't go back to an earlier slide and then jump forward again. And so it's great to create better visuals, and I've shown you how to do that, but then people get worried that then they get stuck to their slides and they can't deviate from that. And it's just not true. So in PowerPoint, there are tools that let you deviate from your script. So you possibly know this if you use PowerPoint or Keynote, that when you're presenting on your screen, you can see here the slide that the audience is seeing on the data projector or on the smart TV, and you can also see what slide's coming up next. So Keynote was the first to do this, and now PowerPoint's caught up and has this feature in there as well. And if you've got speaker notes, they go in there as well. But there's a couple of other little tools. So if you are planning to have audio, you can on the latest PCs and the latest version of PowerPoint, you just press the volume button and you can open up. So I quite often have Spotify open in the background. So if I want a couple of minutes where people are working at their tables, I can play some Spotify music and I can choose when to start that and when to stop it very easily while the slides are showing. But the other really useful feature in the latest version of PowerPoint is that I can, behind the scenes, let me show you, let me go back one slide. And this little thing here opens up the slide sorter in PowerPoint so that I can, in the background while no one else can see it, I can scroll through all my slides. So if I need to jump ahead or jump back, I can quickly scroll back and forth and find the slide that I want and open it up while without it looking messy on the screen. Okay, so that's another little thing that you can do with PowerPoint that a lot of people aren't aware of, and it then gives you the flexibility to know that you're not tied to your slide presentation anymore. You can create the beautiful slides, you can have them in the right sequence, but if you need to go off track because somebody asked a question that you need to go back to an old slide or you need to jump ahead, or because you suddenly get told that you've got to make your presentation 15 minutes shorter, it's very easy to do because you can just jump ahead very easily and elegantly without being stuck to your slide deck. Okay, let me just quickly check if there's any questions about that. I don't see any more coming in. Is it in Keynote as well? I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether Keynote has that particular feature. Yeah, I know it's in the latest version of PowerPoint, and yeah, and it's only visible, of course, when you're connecting to an external projector. So if you normally run your when you're preparing and you're rehearsing, you don't necessarily see that. But when you connect it to an external screen, when you've got two screens, then this is kind of your backup. This is the speaker's screen or presenter view, as it's called in PowerPoint. Okay, so as I said, there are these 7 elements of magnetic messages, and we've only covered a couple of them, but I hope that even the couple that we covered, so we looked in flow, we looked at framing, we looked at the smart art in design, and we looked at this feature that allows you to, around presence, that allows you to move off script quickly. I hope even that has given you some valuable things that you can put into practice in your next presentations. As I said, If you complete the exit survey, which will be coming up soon, then you can download, then you'll automatically get the opportunity to download the presentation skills chapter of my book, The Future of Leadership. And if you're in Perth and you like these ideas and you think it'll be valuable for you or people from your team to get access to ideas like this, but in a much more, like you get a full day, you get more time to work through things, you'll have me there to ask me questions, you'll be able to work in groups as well, then it's really useful to come along to this one day masterclass. And it really is a day packed with real value. It's an interactive, of course, it's interactive and you get lots of time to work on things as well, but it's really valuable. So it's on Thursday, the 2nd of May, so a month from now. If you're coming by yourself, it's $1,000 plus GST. If you want to bring somebody else, then it's $1,500 for 2 people. And I think it's useful not just for yourself, but if you're a team leader or you've got some other leadership role, then it's really valuable to send the sort of people who you think, if they just could improve their presentation skills a little bit, it'll make a dramatic difference to their presentations. So I ran one of these sessions a few weeks ago, and somebody who was there was one of my clients, and he was presenting a couple of weeks later at their state conference. So I won't say which company or which industry, but he was presenting at their state conference as the state manager. And after my session, he said, "Oh, now you've raised the expectations that I now need to improve my PowerPoint slides," because he knew that I was doing the opening keynote and he was presenting after I was. And to his credit, he did it. And he did a great job of using some of the little simple things like smart art to just improve the quality of the slides that he presented. And it made a big difference. He already had credibility in front of the group, but he's reasonably new in the role, and just being able to improve the quality of his slides, just that alone helped improve the impact of his message. So come along to the masterclass if you're in Perth and you think this valuable. Just go to moremagneticmessages.com and register there. But regardless of that, I hope you got some value from today, and I hope you got some ideas that you can put into practice straight away. Thanks, everyone. If you're watching the recording of this, then just sign up at my website, gihanpereira.com, for the future webcasts as well. If you are watching this live, then you don't need to sign up. You'll get the reminders automatically for the future webcasts. Thanks, everyone, and bye for now.